This slide highlights time. This is the last soil forming factor. So time as an essential soil forming factor. This is the last one. Soil formation is a slow process. So the characteristics of a soil depend not only on the other factors, but also how long they have been acting. This is time. The slide distinguishes between absolute time and relative time. Absolute time refers to the actual age of the soil or the length of time since soil formation began. Relative time refers to the degree of weathering and profile development. In other words, how mature the soil appears, which may not always match its absolute or exact age. A soil may be old in years, but still weakly developed if erosion or disturbance repeatedly resets its development. On the other hand, under favorable conditions, soil development may proceed more rapidly. Now move to the second part of the presentation, soil forming processes. I bring back this slide again, and on the left side, there you can see the soil forming factors. Soil forming factors are basically those natural or anthropogenic factors that define what kind of soils form at a given point of the Earth. Because parent materials, topography, climate, biological activity is different in the humid tropics, is different from the temperate regions, it's different from the desert areas, it's different from the boreal regions. We see different kinds of soils. Why? Because the soil forming factors, they drive the so-called soil forming processes. Soil forming processes are basically those processes that take place within the soil. These are those processes that are responsible for the development of horizons in the soil and define the soil properties. On the right side, you can see some examples of soil forming processes. Soil forming processes can be additions, where materials are added to the soil, losses, for example, through the movement of wind or water, or uptake by plants, we lose materials from the soil. Soil forming processes can be transformations, for example, when through chemical weathering, original minerals in the soil transform into another mineral, and translocations, movement of soil constituents, for example, organic or mineral particles in the soil, they move within the soil profile. Same information on the next slide. On the left, you can see the 5 main soil forming factors: the parent material, climate, organisms, topography, and the time. As we discussed, these are those factors that determine the conditions under which soils develop. On the right, we can see the main soil forming processes that operate within the soil body: the additions, the losses, transformations, and the translocations. As we mentioned before, and this is the key message, and that is what we have to remember from today's presentation, the soil forming factors, those are those factors that drive the so-called soil forming processes. Soil forming processes are the mechanisms that actually build and modify the soil profile. Here we can see the examples of the most important soil forming processes. And this slide also shows how they relate to the 4 basic process types, to the additions, losses, transformations, and translocations. Weathering and clay formation are mainly transformations because minerals are altered into new forms. We are going to go through them one by one in more detail. This is just a very brief introduction of them. Humification is also transformations where plant and animal residues are converted into humus. Leaching. Leaching is mainly a loss process because dissolved materials are removed from the soil profile by downward moving water. Clay illuviation and so-called podzolization are mainly translocation processes because materials are moved from one horizon to another within the profile. Salinization and solidification usually involve upward water movement and accumulation of salts, so they are translocations or addition-like accumulations. Glaciation is it is associated with prolonged water saturation and reducing conditions, so it's a transformation process. Peat formation is mainly an addition and accumulation process because organic material builds up faster than it decomposes. Cementation and shrink swell processes are also important transformations that affect soil structure and horizon properties. Finally, soil degradation is linked especially to losses such as erosion, but may involve several processes acting together.